Hi everyone, today let's talk about why the recession is not coming yet. Then we'll talk about Unity software. Then we'll get into the economic calendar as well as Max Payne. Then we'll get into the charts. Then we'll look at my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So they highlight 3 reasons that a recession is always coming but hasn't come yet. They talk about how inflation is coming down. Interest rates are now above inflation rates, which means you have real interest crossing above that zero line, which is all good for the economy. But then they move into some other things here. So we have consumers spending a bunch of money. They have big savings accounts and they're spending all of that money right now. Governments also spending trillions of dollars, whether it's the Inflation Relief Act or the infrastructure bill. Just between those two, you have $1.5 trillion worth of spending. And then they mention that interest rates do seem high, but inflation-adjusted rates are really just barely above that zero line. So it does mean that people are still looking for real returns inside the stock market. And then they also highlight here that means that you're not actually paying a lot of interest for these loans because inflation is getting you out of most of that loss to interest cost. Moving over to Unity software, they said AI once again, and their stock went up 15%. They did launch an AI marketplace. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it has AI in the title, which means it's good. This is a gaming company, so again, I'm not sure how these two things go together, but they say they think AI is going to change gaming, and the stock rose 15%. Again, maybe not a great investment. You don't know how this is actually going to result in earnings for the company, but absolutely something you can trade in the short term based on this hype. Moving over to the economic calendar, this in my opinion is another reason we're not seeing that recession. Building permits, better than expectations. You can see we're green across the board here. 5-year note auction above 4%, a little bit high, but look at this number here for new home sales, 763K versus that 675 number expectation. Consumer confidence also very high. Durable goods orders also positive versus the negative expectation. Everything here looks good. And in my opinion, this is a big driver for the market growth here today. Looking at tomorrow, don't forget we have Fed Powell speaking at 9:30, and I'm sure that's going to affect the markets at least a little bit. Moving over to Max Payne, you can see we're basically right on top of it now, just above it at 435.80. 434 is Max Payne. 430 still that huge put wall. I don't expect to close below that level for this week. 440 seems like a decent level to the upside to pay attention to. So generally stuck in this zone. 435, maybe up to 441 for Max Payne. Number of options, almost 2.4 million, tons of options. Put call ratio still very high at 2.85. Again, looking in this zone for a finish at the end of the week. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps here on the 1 hour and the 12 hour, you can see we got a nice bullish day. We got a new higher high versus yesterday's high. We wicked that 144 EMA here on the 1 hour, and then we sold off from that level, so not super great. Absolutely could see a pullback into a higher low, and then a continuation. On the 12 hour, it looks less bullish. You can see we hit the 21 EMA, rejecting off of that level. And if this ends up establishing as a lower high here, that's going to be quite bearish in my opinion. Momentum is still ticking towards bullish on the 12-hour chart, so you could certainly see this come up into this previous zone and look for that double top. And then if we take out that high, then we're back into the bull trend. Right now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. Does look like we're pushing back up to this previous high, and we can trade it to the bull side here, but being careful to look for either that lower high setting up or a double top. Again, if this is already the top, then we're going to be looking for a lower low, potentially all the way down here at 430, down at this previous trend support. Again, I think 430 is the put wall for the close on the Friday session, so I don't expect a huge sell-off this week, but it doesn't mean that we can't sell off a little bit tomorrow before we ultimately get a rally into the Friday session. Moving over to the NASDAQ here on the 1 hour and the 4 hour, you can see we were selling off, definitely moving lower with that big leg down on Monday, and then the rally here today got back above my 360.44 level. Definitely entered some bull trades on that breakout, and now you can see we didn't get up to my 364.84 level, stopped at the 144 EMA here on the 1 hour chart. We are back above all the EMAs and SMAs on the 4-hour, so that's good to see. Certainly looks like we're pulling back a little bit, just like the SPY is. Momentum on the 4-hour also moving towards bullish, so it seems like we might get a higher low setup and then a continuation higher if we are going to get that kind of a move. And looking at the 4-hour chart, you can see trend resistance up at 368.86 or the previous high up around that 371.25 level, which would be a nice little push from current prices if we did get that kind of a move. Again, certainly looks like we could be establishing a lower high versus this high going back to Thursday. And then if we take out this previous low, and then we're looking back down to 353.24 as a potential lower low setup. Certainly could go either way. 4 hours pointing bullish, 1 hour looking for a shorter term pullback. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, similar thesis, higher low setup versus the low on Monday. Rallying, got above my 138.24 level just by a little bit, and you can see we're back below it here now after hours. You want to see this hold in this area and push back up into this previous zone. That would be a nice trade up to 186 or 187. Momentum still bullish, and it does look like we're going in that direction. Similarly here on the Dow, right at that level, stop just below it by a few cents. You want to see it get above that and start to push up to that next one up at 343.23 and these previous highs up around 345. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple making a new high close. The close was at 188.05, looking good, still marching along on this trend. Basically on top of this trend line, continues to go higher here. Tesla, on the other hand, found a little bit of a bottom, but really this just looks like a counter trend rally, similar to what we saw here going back to Thursday the 22nd, retraced up to that resistance and then sold off dramatically. And my expectation at this point is that we're going to get back into this previous highly traded zone, up around 257, looking at that 21 EMA at 256.30 as well. So right in this zone, retest there, and then we get a continuation lower, looking for a retest of that 232.84 level. Overall, this trend still looks bearish to me. Momentum ticking towards bullish, so that is worth watching, but I do think we're going to find resistance in this zone. Moving over to Microsoft and Meta. Microsoft looking pretty weak here. Tested the 21 EMA, still below that level, and it does seem to be looking to sell off from there. If we get a clear rejection at the 21, that's going to look very weak. Looking for a retest of the 144 here at 325.27, and then we're looking at these previous lows around 322.17. I'm really looking for support down at 315 for a buying opportunity, just below that 200 SMA here on the 4-hour chart. I do think we're going to see a little bit more substantial pullback here on Microsoft. Meta looking a little bit stronger, got back above these previous highs. Not the most recent all-time high here, up around 289.91, but this kind of neckline that we had here at 284.92, we're back above that, and if we take this high out tomorrow and we get a continuation on Meta, that's going to look more bullish. Overall, this trend looks more solid here on Meta. Moving over to NVDA and Alphabet. NVIDIA found some strength. Again, still looking at that 21 EMA as resistance at 422.64. Certainly could continue as a downtrend in the short term. Momentum moving towards bullish. If it takes out that 21 EMA, looking up to previous highs at around 440. Alphabet, on the other hand, looks quite weak. In the pre-market, we hit that 200 SMA down at 117.07, pushed up to the 9 EMA here on the 4-hour chart, rejected quite strongly, and it looks more bearish. Overall, looking at this structure, it looks like one of the weakest we've seen. It's actually quite similar to Tesla as well. If this 200 SMA here on the 4-hour chart breaks, then we have a pretty significant down move before we get to any major resistance, any major support down around 109.25. Moving over to Staples and Discretionary. Staples continues to hold this 55 EMA, chopping in this zone, got back above $74, closed above it. We're retesting here after hours. You want to see this continue here. Definitely should have grabbed up a position. This looks quite strong in my opinion, looking at 75.40 tomorrow or over the next week or so. Discretionary, on the other hand, continues to chop at this resistance. You see we hit it right on the money once again, 166.78. and I do expect this to continue to hold. And if this breaks down one more time and establishes a lower low versus this previous low, that's going to be a pretty clear indicator that we're going to see a significant down move, at least to 162, if not a breakdown to 158. And then we have the longer term EMA sitting just below that. So certainly could be looking at a bigger pullback on discretionary. Sticking to the charts from yesterday, you can see energy looking quite good, closing basically at its highs. After the gap up, looks good. You want to see this push up to the 55 EMA at 79.94. That would be good. Get above that 144 EMA and start to look at a stronger reversal. Momentum, still bullish. Everything looks good on energy. Utilities, not as clean. Tested this level through a couple of wicks like we saw yesterday. Still not too bad. We're above the 9 EMA and VWAP on the 4-hour chart. So not terrible, but not as bullish as it could be. You really want to see it hold above 65.75 at the end of day, and then we can see this rally into 66.10 or 66.58. Momentum still moving towards bullish. RSI back above the SMA, but below the 50 line. Again, not terrible, but not as strong as you would want to see it here on utilities. Moving over to transports. Transports had another very bullish day, which is interesting. You can see we just got above that previous high on yesterday's chart, and then the big push through that most recent high, and now we got a high close versus the high from February. So everything looking super bullish here on transports. Zooming out here, you can see that 3-peak type move that we're looking at. We didn't quite get to the top of this wick up around 247.84, or the wick going back to the August high up around 250.72. So certainly could get up into these areas, looking a little bit more bullish on transports compared to most of the other charts. We do have a little bit of divergence here in the short term on the daily chart, which is not generally what you would want to see. Looking at that peak from 15 June, now we have higher prices and a lower RSI read. You really want to see that cap back out and get at least an even RSI if we are going to continue higher here. Definitely at a resistance point, definitely at these previous highs, but it does look like a pretty nice setup and certainly could take out that high going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to breadth here on the 50 and the 200. I didn't talk about it yesterday, but I definitely should have. We had a pretty nice move in breadth with markets moving lower. And then here today, we got another big push back above resistance on both of these charts. Both of them look quite good and looks like we're going higher into tomorrow's session. We are at some pretty clear resistance, so I'm not jumping on it super hard yet. I do want to see a little bit more of a push on these charts as well as the NASDAQ and SPY charts. So keeping an eye on this one. Does look good going into tomorrow's session though. Moving over to the dollar on the 4-hour and the daily chart. As you would expect, the dollar fell with the rally that we saw. We're still at a support level, which is interesting. If it's going to hold, you want it to jump now back up to 102.98 or 103.64. But if it's going to break down from this level and move back to these previous lows or this deeper low around 101.25, that would be interesting. If we get that deeper breakdown, then we should expect equities to be moving much higher in my opinion. So keeping an eye on this level going into the evening and early morning sessions here for the dollar. Moving over to JNK and TLT, you can see JNK gap down through some wicks, got back above $91 and rallied back into this zone. At this point, we're kind of consolidating now. It is a higher low setup versus this previous low in May. You really want to see this push and take out this previous high up to 92.50. That would be very nice. But we're still struggling below some of these EMAs and SMAs. Momentum still moving towards bullish. RSI got above the 50 line, so it does look good going into tomorrow's session, but definitely in an area where we could find some resistance. TLT sold off this session. We hit that 103.70 level once again with a big wick in the pre-market and then sold off pretty much throughout the day, very close to the lows and selling off here after hours. Momentum moving back towards bearish, looking to cross the 50 line on a closing basis tomorrow. Not super great on TLT. I did mention that this looked quite weak on a grind and we've been consolidating in this zone for a while. Can see what that looks like, just big choppy movements in this zone for many months at this point. TLT not giving us a ton of information here in the short term. Moving over to the volatility indices, MOVE index rallied here a little bit, still in a downtrend, but it did get above the 9 EMA. Certainly interesting, certainly could push up to the 21 EMA, at least a short-term pullback here on the bond volatility index. Looking at the VIX, however, we wicked that resistance once again, rejected from there. We are holding at the 21 EMA, and if it's going to hold, it should do it basically right now. And then we get the continuation higher on the VIX. If the 21 breaks down, then we should be looking to these previous lows, or we're looking back down to that 1177 area. Right now, hard to say. Does look slightly more bullish than it has recently off of this 21 and the gap up yesterday versus this downtrend that we had, but not super strong coming off of that resistance and breaking down. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I did fairly well. Looks like around $700. Looking at the IWM, picked up another put at 181 going into tomorrow's session. Still have that 181 call. We'll see if I end up letting that go in tomorrow's session. Might roll it out, might just establish another put position in my IRA. Either way, I think the Russell still looks pretty good. NASDAQ, I have 2 covered calls going into tomorrow's session. I rolled one of these out from today. I had a 360 and I rolled it to 361. Again, probably going to get executed on these. I didn't open any new positions going into tomorrow's session. We're at resistance and I do want to see a little bit more confirmation to the upside. We're actually falling a little bit more after hours, so glad I didn't pick up any overnight positions that had too much risk. These covered calls are down about 1% from current prices, so I'm pretty well protected on these, even if the market goes down a little bit tomorrow. Overall, neutral to bullish, but definitely at a resistance level where I do need to see a little bit more confirmation before I scale in any more. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of the recession. Is it going to come later this year, or is it not going to come at all and we're going to get that no landing that people have been talking about? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.